Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Modern Squid Podcast, where we get to know the people behind our favorite writers and brands. On this week's episode, we have Helen Tornquist. Helen's done a 30,000-mile trip around South America. She's also a teacher, and she speaks multiple languages. With that, let's get started.
How's your week been?
Pretty good. Yeah, state of the world is always fluctuating, but other than that, good.
Good.
Yeah, how about you? Are things calming down at work?
The opposite.
Oh no.
Well, it's partially because I took a week off, and so my week was ending on a Wednesday, which meant I had to finish my week's worth of work by Wednesday, so that I wouldn't feel like I was missing things when I was out on vacation. And I actually ended up having to go into my office one day, and then this morning I checked my payroll calendar and realized I got to cut my vacation a day short because I have to do payroll.
Oh gosh.
On the day that was supposed to be the last day of my vacation. But that's what happens when you're a small company. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, it's been a fun vacation anyway. I ate a bunch of food, and yeah, it's been a good time.
That's
so
good.
It's all worth it,
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we should get into it. I already took up a bunch of your time. I don't want to take up too much, so I think I'll start off by mentioning a few interesting facts about you. All right, so some interesting things about Helen. You are a twin, and you have been writing for 4 years, it sounds like.
Yep.
And you did 30,000 miles in South America from 2016 to 2017 time range. So I think you want to tell the story about your finding out that you're actually an identical twin?
Yeah. I'm an identical twin, and my sister and I and my parents actually have been part of a twin study through the University of Minnesota ever since we were I think 5 or something, or maybe 10. And we go every 4 years. And so the first time we went, we were like, oh yeah, we're fraternal. And this guy actually came into the room and was like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. I'm part of this, doing this study. And so are you guys fraternal or identical? And we were like, oh, we're fraternal. And he was like, no, you're not. And we're like, yeah, we are. And he's like, no, I can tell from your earlobes that you guys are identical. And we're like, maybe we should take a blood test or something. And so we took a blood test, and sure enough, we were identical. And I guess my parents just got the wrong memo when we were born, and they thought the doctor said we were fraternal, but we were actually identical. So yeah, that was kind of a interesting surprise when we were 10 years old. And then but it was really cool being part of those studies, because we learned not only that we were identical, but that I mean, it's just kind of, they're using them to learn about nature versus nurture, and did all these really interesting tests on us. Half of the day would be interview style, where they're kind of ask us about our personalities and life experiences, and then the other half would be in the lab, where they would hook up this looked like a swimming cap to our heads with all these wires coming out. And then I remember one of the things they did was they would put us in a dark room and have a video playing, and then every 10 minutes or something, they would blast it. We had headphones on, they would blast a loud noise in our ears, and then they would see how our brain waves reacted to that. So it was a very interesting experience. And I don't know, I was kind of traumatized about it when I was little, but as I got older, I was like, this is really cool, actually.
So did he ever explain, I mean, do people typically have unique earlobes, and identical twins happen to have identical earlobes too? I mean, I guess how is he using the earlobes to tell? I didn't realize that people's earlobes were so uniquely identifiable.
I didn't either. We didn't really get into it, but there was something about our earlobes that he was like, "You're for sure identical." So
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to
yeah,
look that up because I'm really curious if they're like fingerprints where, no one's earlobes are 100% the same or something.
yeah. It's
Um,
interesting.
Now, were they during those tests, were they testing your guys' personalities, did you say too, to see how close they were, or was that not part of it?
Yeah, well, it seemed like they were asking us a lot of questions about our personalities and life experiences. I don't know. I never really got a lot of like feedback about that. I think it was funded by like some like they're like they asked us a lot of questions about drug and alcohol use. I think because of like funding reasons, they had to provide that kind of information. So that was kind of like I didn't really get a lot of we didn't get a lot of like results about like what it means, what our answers to those questions actually meant.
Okay. And you guys have been close though for a long time, right?
Yeah, we're like we've always been best friends. Yeah, I would say when we were little, we were pretty codependent, and still are in some ways, but we've actually lived in different countries for most of our adult lives.
And so how would you describe your guys' personalities? Like what makes you what makes you similar, would you say? What makes you different?
Um, so I think we have a lot of the same interests. We both love traveling and yeah, we have a lot of the same interests. But personality wise, I think we're pretty different. I've always been more introverted. Growing up, she did a lot of the talking for both of us, which was like fine with me because I felt like she could read my mind. So it was just like she would just talk for the both of us. And yeah, she was just a little more comfortable with that. And we've done a lot of traveling together. And on those trips, it's like we're kind of like the perfect pair because she does all of the like talking to people and I do all of the like logistic stuff. So yeah.
How many trips have you guys done together?
Well, actually, when we were, when we were like in, let's say like sixth grade or something, we saved up all of our babysitting money and we told our mom that we wanted to go visit our great aunt and our uncle in California. So we saved up all our babysitting money and she said that if we could afford to pay the ticket, that she would pay for things once we're there. So we actually did that. And the two of us, like, I think we were like 12 or 13 or something. We just got on a plane and went to California and met up with our uncle. And then we met up with our great aunt and kind of like hung out around Hollywood. And we're just like, yeah, that was kind of like our first trip together. And then when we were, this wasn't really together actually, but the summer after our sophomore year in high school, we both went on an exchange to Argentina. So we went together, but we actually separated once we got there because we were with host families on separate sides of the country. But then after that summer, we went back to Argentina together a couple of times. And my sister lived in Brazil for a year, and I went to visit her there. And we did a little bit of traveling around South America. So yeah, it's kind of
Okay.
some traveling together.
So, last time we talked, you'd mentioned that, there was sort of a transition period when you went to Argentina the first time because your sister wasn't really there to talk for you. And so, especially through your blog that I was reading, you'd mentioned there's a lot of anxiety and you kind of felt sick, probably from the anxiety. And, it took a lot of, it took a lot out of you to be there. And now after you left that trip, though, you still wanted to travel, and it seems like you still wanted to travel even on your own without your sister. So how did you, I guess, go from having so much anxiety, being alone without your sister there, to still saying, you know what, I'm going to do this anyway? Like, what do you think happened to facilitate that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, well, the first time I went, it was like very weird because that was really the first time I had ever been separated from my sister. Like we were like together in the womb, and then we just like grew up like sharing at the same room and just being together every minute that we could. And then when we went to Argentina, it was so weird because I remember the first couple nights with my host family, and they would like ask me questions, and I would just kind of like sit there and like not say anything. And I think it was because I was like waiting for my sister to respond for me, but like she wasn't there. So it was like a very weird thing. And yeah, I got had a lot of anxiety. I did get sick a couple of times, and I didn't really know anything about like anxiety or that I had it. And so I didn't really know what was going on. My host family was kind of pretty worried about me. So yeah, it was kind of a weird experience. And yeah, a little traumatizing in some ways, but I don't know. I guess when I got back, I just realized like how much I had learned about myself and the world, that I was just like, it was very interesting to be in a new place and experiencing new things all the time, that it was just kind of like addicting. I wanted more of it. So yeah, that's why I kind of just kept pushing myself in that way, that somehow, for some reason, the value of that experience was greater than my anxieties about, meeting new people and doing new things.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a lot of issues with germs. um, but I still ended up doing jujitsu and MMA at one point, and because I saw the value, I felt the value I got out of it was greater than my anxiety around the germs, because it's I can't think of much worse than having a bunch of people sweat all over you, personally. So I definitely get that. Now, as far as your anxiety, do you feel like you still deal with anxiety as an adult now?
Yeah, definitely. But I think, yeah, I'm kind of like more used to it now and have developed some coping mechanisms over the years. And I've found like I now know like the language to use to talk about it, and, for myself, and also to explain it to other people. So that's helpful.
Okay. So what kind of techniques did you come up with to sort of manage the anxiety? What's worked for you?
Well, I think first and foremost, it was just helpful to like know what it was. Um, yeah, just kind of like realizing that like this is what's going on. Other people have experienced this, was very comforting. And yeah, and then um, yeah, there's like different things that I do. Like most recently, I discovered this, I don't know what it's called, but it's like this five senses thing where if I'm feeling really overwhelmed or something, you like stop and start identifying different things that you like one thing you can see, one thing you can taste, one thing you can feel, one thing you can touch, or actually that's the same thing. Smell, taste, feel, I'll kind of go through all the senses of things that are around you. And I felt like that was a really helpful technique. Because when I get overwhelmed, it's hard for me to like breathe properly. And so I was trying to do like these breathing techniques, but that wasn't very helpful. Because I was just like, had all these things going on in my mind. But when I found that if I distract my mind with other things, then that helps me to be able to breathe, actually. So that was really good. And then, of course, just like being outdoors is a huge thing for me. That's just like a stress and anxiety relief. If I can get outside, preferably go to like a lake or some kind of body of water, that's really helpful for me. Riding my motorcycle, things like that.
Okay. I think distraction and awareness seem to be pretty common themes with folks when it comes to dealing with anxiety, at least in a healthy way, because some people deal with it, alcohol or something. But I tend to just throw myself into stuff, just keep myself really busy. And so I tend to get more productive the more anxiety I'm having. And I was talking to my doctor about it because I was having some other things going on, and we were, discussing it. He was like, "Hey, you think that could be anxiety?" And I was like, "Probably," and so we discussed, some of the different things that people can do to cope. And he asked what I was currently doing with it. And I was like, well, what I find myself doing right now is just like throw myself into my hobbies, and learn things and just be really productive. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, if I don't have anything I can really do in relation to those things for whatever reason, then I just start cleaning.
Yeah, I do that too sometimes.
And, he was just like, that sounds like a healthier way to cope than, so he didn't think any medication was required, because I guess that's another option with anxiety is medication, which I didn't even know until this year that was a thing. So, yeah. All right. So now, while you were there, you and your sister were in different areas. Did you ever ask her if she had any anxiety while she was with her host family that first time?
That's a good question. She never talked about it. Yeah, it seemed like she was coping better than I was. Being able to, she's just always been able to, she's like, I wouldn't say she's like a talker that she over talks, but she's very good at expressing herself verbally in like many different languages. I remember we both speak like Spanish and a little bit of Portuguese, but I remember like after that experience, like after like a month, she not only spoke Spanish, but like she spoke it exactly like her host mom, like the same like tones and like accent and everything, because she just like has that kind of brain where she just soaks up that verbal, those kinds of things. And so she like speaks or spoke exactly like her host mom. And so I could tell she was talking a lot, which was great. And I think that helped her to cope easier. But I mean, I know she missed me, but I don't think she had like panic attacks or anything like I did.
Okay. Well, that's another interesting thing for the folks who are studying twins to look at, maybe, because you would think that with such strong genetic similarities, that I don't know. As a layperson, I would expect there to be more correlation between the situations that cause you guys anxiety, but it doesn't seem to pan out that way. It sounds like so.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. That like that, because that summer was kind of the first time we were separated. Before that, like almost all of our life experiences had been the same, and we have the same genetics. So you would think that we would kind of, react in similar ways to things, but it seemed pretty different.
Wow, that is legitimately interesting because this is kind of an aside, but growing up, I wanted to be a genetic engineer, and I really had a strong interest in genes and DNA and twins and things like that too when I was a lot younger. And then I discovered I hated chemistry, so I had to switch over to business. But anyway,
Yeah, it's really fascinating though. I also hate science and chemistry, but I also am really interested in these kinds of things.
yeah, I feel like my interest really is more along like I'd rather see and hear about the results than be the person titrating something into a beaker or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so was there ever a point in your guys' lives growing up where you sort of, I don't know, not got sick of each other, but sort of pushed back against being attached at the hip?
Um, yeah, I would say like towards the end of middle school, my sister actually mm, moved out of our room and moved into the guest bedroom in the basement. Um, yeah, just because I guess she needed a little more space, which was funny because I ended up just moving in there with her. And we would just there's a big bed, so we just slept in the same bed most nights, which was kind of funny. Yeah, so I think there was a little bit of back and forth trying to be our own person to some extent. And I remember being really frustrated. Most days we would get dressed, I would get dressed in my room, she would get dressed in her room, and then we would meet on the middle floor, and we would be wearing not the same thing, but the same colors, the same color pants, same color top, same kind of idea of an outfit. And we were like, oh my God, you have to change today. You have to change, because we didn't want to look the same. We want to go to school looking the same. So that was kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works because I'm not a twin, but my sister and I are about a year and a half apart. And I remember when we were really little, we were just, inseparable. And then there was a certain age, where I especially started just wanting to have my own space, I guess. And it was hard because she was still in the phase of wanting to be together 24/7 and would just follow me everywhere. And I remember getting frustrated, I just want to do something on my own for once,
Mm.
you know. But again, I'm curious if it works the same way with twins because I hear, you hear stories about twins who are just like, nope, we've always been together, we always want to be together, we can't imagine, being separated. And even into adulthood, they'll live together.
Yeah, that was always our plan, that we were gonna marry twins and then move into a duplex together. So that didn't end up working, but yeah, I hear about twins that they can't stand each other, even identical twins, they do not want to be together at all, which is weird for me, but
Wow. Yeah. I wonder what happens to kind of facilitate that, where they just get to a point where they're like, no, if I never see you again, it'll be too soon.
yeah.
Huh. Now you guys both are adventurous, but it seems like you're adventurous in slightly different ways because, you ride motorcycles and you ride them, not just ride, riding feels like an understatement to someone who does 30,000 miles in a year and then does another, 6,000 miles later with your dad, and then has a whole nother trip planned for whenever you can do it, all the way through Alaska. So I guess want to describe kind of how you guys are adventurous in your own unique ways.
Yeah, so my sister does not ride a motorcycle, although she does ride on the back of mine sometimes, and she always screams and stuff in my ear when she does. But then when we finish, she's like, "Can we do that again tomorrow?" So she does like riding on the back, but she doesn't ride her own, and I kind of doubt she will do that. She doesn't seem interested in it. But yeah, she's done way more traveling than I have. She went to a college where she was in a different country every year. And then, well, actually before she went to college, she did like a gap year exchange in Brazil for a year. And then she did the 4 years of global college. And then I think she moved to China after that, and was working as like a translator editor there. And now she lives in Barcelona, Spain. So she's done a bunch of traveling in between there. She's been to like different places in Asia that I haven't been to, and Europe. So yeah, she's done a lot of traveling, none of it on motorcycles. And I would say most of my traveling has been on motorcycles. So that's kind of like the main difference. And I would also say like, I'm probably more outdoorsy than her. We both grew up in Minnesota and going to our family's cabin in northern Minnesota. So we both like the outdoors, but I would say I really like the outdoors. And, I was a sea kayak instructor for 3 summers on Lake Superior, and kind of a little more hardcore than her in that sense. So yeah, just kind of different styles of adventuring.
Would you say that she's more of a like a city traveler, or do you think that she does like outdoorsy stuff too when she does her traveling?
Yeah, she's definitely more of a city traveler. That's a good way to put it. Because yeah, she like I visited her in China when she was living in China, and she lived in New York for a little bit. And I love visiting those places, but I could never live there for any kind of long period of time. But she seemed to do well in those kinds of environments, whereas I was just like going crazy, like get me to a lake or something.
Yeah. That's interesting. I am, when I travel, I tend to try to split it a little bit where I'll do a lot of cities because I really love architecture and history and stuff. So I like to kind of walk the cities and see cool little shops. But at the same time, I always try to get out to at least one day where I'm out in the wilderness somewhere, or, whatever happens to be around, whether it's, the countryside or mountains or whatever.
Yeah.
But okay. So now, what was sort of the first thing that got you thinking about riding a motorcycle, would you say?
First thing.
Was there a moment?
Well, I grew up hearing about my dad's motorcycle trips to Alaska, and so I kind of always wanted to go to Alaska. And then the motorcycle thing was also, I would say, intriguing to me. And then as I got older, like I had a couple opportunities to like ride on the back of motorcycles, and I just like love that. But yeah, I think it was like, a mix of hearing stories from my dad about his motorcycle trips, and then just kind of like learning more about motorcycles as I got older, and then kind of realizing that it's kind of like the perfect mix between 2 things that I love, which are travel and being outdoors. So it's kind of what led me to it.
Okay. And you'd mentioned that your father and you have another you just finished a trip, right? I think you guys just did a US trip, and you're planning one, through Canada up into Alaska. Is that sort of your like main connection with your dad, or do you guys have other things that you do as shared interests?
We actually have quite a lot in common. Yeah, we both are really into the outdoors. Yeah, I would say that in our family of 6, the 2 of us are the most outdoorsy. And then we're both very introverted. We both work in education. So we share a lot of the same breaks, like like winter break is, Thanksgiving break and spring break. So our summers off. So we spend a lot of time together in the summers. And yeah, I think those are the main, and now recently motorcycling, because he actually stopped riding when, like, pretty soon after I was born. And then I got into it like 4 years ago, and then he got into it again. So now we have that in common. And it seems like whenever we're together, like, I think it's kind of annoys my mom that all we want to talk about is motorcycles.
So tell me about your recent trip with him. Where did you guys go? What'd you do?
So originally we were planning on going to Alaska, but that obviously couldn't happen this year. So we were trying to figure out if we wanted to do something else, and if so, what that would look like. So we decided to do like a trip. So I live in Chicago. My dad lives in Minnesota, and we decided to ride to the West Coast, so to Oregon, and then up to Washington and back to the Midwest. So we ended up going about 6,000 miles and through about, I think, 10 states. I went through 10, he went through 8, because I did Illinois and Wisconsin to meet up with him in Minnesota. And it was great, but it was pretty weird traveling this year during a pandemic. I would say the first week was pretty rough. Just between like the heat, we left, I think, mid-July. So it was super hot, going through like southern Minnesota and the plains of South Dakota. And that whole area was just like, it was like 102 degrees when we were going through the Badlands. And neither my dad nor I do very well in the heat. So we were really suffering with that. We definitely were planning to do more miles than was really realistic for us. So we were suffering from saddle sore. And then in some places we went to, like, they didn't really have any restrictions in regards to like COVID safety stuff. So I was kind of really nervous about my dad getting COVID, because he's older and is more at risk. So after that first week, I was like, I was like, I think maybe we should just head back. This is not fun. This is scary. But he was like pretty determined to get to Oregon, where his sister actually lives. So we ended up just kind of cutting a lot, kind of like a couple of states that we were originally planning on going to that were high COVID risk areas. We cut the amount of miles that we were doing every day. And just kind of took it easy. And actually, once we got out of like the plains and into the mountains, it cooled off significantly. We were able to do more camping, and it was just a lot more enjoyable.
So what percentage would you say that you got to camp versus use hotels?
We camped about a third of the time. We were planning on doing more of that, but just with like the heat and everything, by the end of a lot of those days, we were just like, get us a hotel and a bucket of ice. So
were the campgrounds as packed at the places you stopped as they are in other places in the country?
They were pretty packed, yeah. And most of the places we went to were actually like RV parks that had a couple places for tents. but yeah, and since we were in small tents with just motorcycles and not cars or RVs or anything, we were able to fit in a lot of places. But yeah, they were pretty packed.
Wow. Yeah, I just this weekend I was riding past a couple camp spots up here in a place called Snow Bowl, which is up on a mountain near Flagstaff, and I was shocked because the high was in the 40s and the campgrounds were still full.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's getting even colder overnight. It's like,
Wow.
oh, those
Yeah.
are some people who really want to camp.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm more of a baby about the cold, I guess. Because I live in Phoenix, so I'm kind of used to dealing with heat.
Wow.
But the cold is just at this point. I've been in Phoenix long enough that 70 degrees, and I need a jacket. It's getting really chilly for me.
Yeah, I'm exactly the opposite. I love the cold, especially sleeping in the cold. My dad and I have gone winter camping a couple times, and it's just like great.
Well, I had a bad experience where, I don't actually know, or I haven't known that much about camping. I like to do it and I would do it and I just got lucky, I think. But one time I was out somewhere and it got really cold and I didn't realize that the sleeping bag ratings were for, where you won't die. So if your sleeping bag is rated for 40 degrees, it doesn't mean you're going to be comfortable at 40 degrees. It just means that you won't die at 40 degrees, right?
Yeah.
And so I had the wrong sleeping bag for the temperatures that we were in to be comfortable. And so I was
Oh yeah.
freezing all night. I couldn't sleep. And, I was just so mad because I was like, I got the right sleeping bag. Why am I so cold? And it's like, no, I did not get the right sleeping bag. I had the wrong sleeping bag.
Yeah, and that makes a world of a difference if you have the right gear, the right layers and everything.
Oh yeah, I've got a sleeping bag now though that's rated much better, and so half the time I've got to vent the thing because it gets just too warm.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, um, so I know you mentioned that you and your dad are big talkers. So how much would you say you talked over your headsets while you were riding?
We were not chatting over the headsets at all. Yeah, it was kind of like just, I need to go to the bathroom or I need gas again. Yeah, it's already a struggle for us to talk, and putting a headset, it's not, just made it even less appealing.
So then when you're camping, do you guys chat while you're sitting around the campfire or anything, or you just kind of hang out?
Yeah, we do talk when we're not riding. Yeah, we did actually have a lot of great conversations, which I'm, really grateful that I got to spend that time with him. And yeah, we lived in different states for like 10 years now since I moved to Chicago for college. And so being able to spend that quality time with him was great.
Now, did he ever come out to see you while you were in Argentina or anywhere in South America?
Yeah. Well, on my motorcycle trip, he came at the end of my trip. He met me in Cusco, and we did like a 5-day hike to Machu Picchu together, which was really cool. That was actually my second time in Cusco because I went there on my way kind of at the beginning of my trip. And when I was there, I was riding around and I came across this, they're like these glass dome houses. I was like riding in the mountains and I came across this like little village of these like glass dome houses. And I figured out that they were like, you could like go on these trips and you would stay in these glass houses, in the mountains. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to bring my dad here. Like, it was like the first thing that I thought. And, I never thought that he would actually come and we would be able to do that together. But we actually ended up, he was able to come out, and I figured out which like tour group did that and booked the tour for us. So we were able to do that 5-day hike together, and we stayed in these glass dome houses, and it was really cool.
So what would you say was the coolest aspect of those glass houses?
I don't know. They're just like, it really like, I mean, it's kind of like a weird thing to be like driving through the mountains in these kind of remote area. And then there's just like 10 of these glass domes there. And I don't know, like my dad and I both love the cold. So it kind of reminded me of like these igloos, and then like the mountains are so cool. I just knew he would appreciate it.
So are they spaced out enough that there's a bit of privacy? Because if you're, I mean, I assume you're spending the night there, right? So
Yeah, they were spaced out pretty well. I think there was some kind of like shade or something in there too. So yeah.
okay. So then, are they kind of set up so that you could basically see the stars and the scenery through the
Yeah.
shelter? Is that kind of their point, I guess, or?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, because I wasn't sure because there are also those like research facilities where they have, I think, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like they're similar shape where they kind of set up like self-sustaining little communities or whatever.
Yeah, and I think for those that like that they probably use more like yurts or something, that are a little more like something you would want to live in long term. I was surprised we were freezing in these glass dome things, because obviously there's not really insulation or anything. So it's really just like a one night experience, kind of tourist experience type of thing.
Yeah. So does visiting Machu Picchu, I mean, there's got to be faster ways than a 5-day hike. So you guys specifically chose a 5-day hike, I assume.
Yes, yeah. You can definitely just take the train there from straight from Cusco, do it in a day. But we both really love hiking and wanted to have more of an outdoorsy experience, so we opted for that.
Okay. Now, did you hike back too, or did you guys hop a train and come back, or?
We took a train. Like it was kind of like you take a train to the closest town, and then I think our tour had it set up so we took a bus or something most of the way to Cusco.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you guys did like an out and back hike.
No.
All right. Now, you were mentioning last time that your motorcycle really did a great job holding up until the very last day when you were supposed to meet your father, right? So, what happened to the bike on that last day?
Yeah, it was amazing that, it lasted like almost 30,000 miles with, I mean, I just did regular maintenance on it along the way. And pretty much nothing bad happened until, yeah, that last day I was going through the mountains on my way to Cusco, and I was just going up this mountain and my chain broke, and I didn't know how to fix it or have anything to fix it. And so I just kind of like pulled over, spent like 10-15 minutes just crying and feeling really bad for myself. And then I started thinking like, okay, I'm probably like less than 5 miles away from the closest town, behind me. And maybe I can just get someone to give me a ride there. And, the next person that comes by, just wave them down. So I tried waving down a bunch of people. A couple people didn't stop, but eventually, I think like after an hour or so, this guy driving like an ambulance van thing stopped and said he would give me a ride. So he drove me into the town and kind of like drove around the town, like asking people like where a bike mechanic shop is, and he dropped me off right at the shop. And then I think I rode on the back of the mechanic's motorcycle to my motorcycle, and he kind of like just fixed the chain, but he said that it had stretched pretty kind of a lot. So he suggested that I not try and ride it the rest of the way, and that he said he could put a new chain on. So then I rode my bike back down the mountain to the town where he was, and he actually forgot to reconnect, I think, like the back brakes. So I rode without back brakes down that mountain, which was kind of scary. But yeah, I made it down, and then he put a new chain on, just stayed in the town that night, and then rode to Cusco the next day.
Okay. And which kind of bike was that?
It's called an XR 250, which is kind of like the South American version of like a CRF 250L in the US.
Okay. And you bought it while you were out there, right?
Yeah, I bought it used from some guy in Lima, and who said that his wife wasn't going to let him ride anymore, so he was selling this bike, and yeah, it worked out great.
Okay. So it sounds like he must have maintained it pretty well. If all you had to do was regular maintenance, and it made it 30,000 miles in basically a year, right? So
yeah, I think he kind of like took it on a couple of trips, like, yeah, kind of like around Peru, and then just kind of stopped riding for a long time. So yeah, it was in really good condition.
okay. So now on your trip through South America, where did you go? What countries did you hit?
So I started in Peru, and then went through Bolivia, spent one night in Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, spent a couple of days in Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and then kind of like looped back through the middle of Brazil back into Peru.
Okay. And what was your favorite country, would you say?
They're also different, but I would say I think Peru, which I spent the most time in, it was just, well, I mean, I don't know. I'll always love Argentina because that's like the first place in South America that I went to. But on that trip, I really enjoyed my time in Peru because it was just a place I've always wanted to visit. Ever since I was little, I just was like drawn to Peru, and it's just a really beautiful country with everything from, there's the ocean. I spent time living on the ocean. I was in the mountains. Yeah, there's kind of, there's jungles, there's a little bit of everything. So I really enjoyed my time in Peru.
Was there anything that really stood out for you about Peru, though? Anything that's just like maybe was the I don't know, the thing that pushed Peru over the edge for you for being one of your favorites?
I think the mountains were just so amazing to me. Just growing up in the Midwest, I hadn't had almost any experience with mountains, and which made it really exciting, but also kind of like scary and difficult for me in terms of like the elevation. I was really found that I was really affected by that for most of the time I was there. Actually, I had like really bad stomach issues and that kind of stuff. But I just remember riding through the mountains, and you're like literally driving through the clouds. Like I never imagined, like it was just like a dream. And I remember just having this feeling of just being like having a high, but like also being in so much pain because of the elevation, but being so happy. Like I probably had the hugest smile on my face, even though I was just suffering so much. So it's an interesting experience.
Yeah. What place had the best food, would you say?
Again, they're all very different, and I really like trying new foods. and I would say I like the foods in pretty much every country that I went to, although some really did not sit well with me and made my stomach hurt. Particularly in Peru and Bolivia, I was had a lot of stomach issues. I love Argentine food, a lot of really good meats and cheese and pasta. But yeah, on this particular trip, I really love to learn to love Brazilian food, which I remember not really liking when I visited my sister in Brazil like 10 years ago. But this trip, I remember like every time I sat down to have lunch or something, the plates were so colorful. They had a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables and different kinds of meats and stews and fish that were all just really delicious.
Now, are you much of a drinker?
No.
Okay, so were you sampling the wine of the regions or any of the local liquors?
No, I'm not a drinker. Yeah.
Okay.
I know some people really like I'm sure you could make a whole trip out of that.
I mean, I just enjoy trying not just the regional dishes, but I usually try to drink some of the regional drinks and things too when I go places. So I'm always curious to hear, because my goal is to try to go everywhere I can, right? Everyone always asks me, like, where do you want to go next? And it's always, I want to go everywhere. So I just kind of have to pick something, because if I had to just pick by what I want to do, it's impossible, right? Like if you look at the map, I want to go everywhere on there. But I do like to hear from people about things too, like, if they had like a special, I hear, for instance, Peru has a special drink that comes in like a cup, like a unique cup or something. I don't think it's booze though, right?
Yeah, what's it called? Oh my gosh.
All the travel
I
channels
totally
talk
know.
about
I
it.
totally know what it is, and I'm completely blanking on it. But yeah, I didn't do well. I'm just not generally not a drinker, but actually my first family that I stayed with in Peru for like the first 3 or 4 months, they were evangelicals, so they did not drink at all. And then the second family that I stayed with were actually Mormons, so they didn't drink at all. And so yeah, it didn't really come up or anything. That wasn't even something we really talked about.
Then let me ask you this: do you drink coffee?
No, I don't drink coffee.
So you didn't even try any of the South American coffees?
No, yeah, I don't. I've never liked coffee. My sister loves coffee though. She started drinking coffee when she lived in Brazil, but I never been a coffee drinker. I'm basically like Mormon, but not actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, not everyone has to have, a love for coffee. Although I do say people who drink coffee are more trustworthy.
That's interesting.
No, it's a joke. Because when you look at like what are they, the types of work that drink some of the most coffee, accountants always are really high up on that list. And I do accounting as my day job, and so I actually do drink a lot of coffee. I had to dial it back at one point because when I was in my mid-20s, I started getting heart palpitations. And I didn't know what it was. I thought I was going to die. So I was talking to my doctor out in DC, and he's like, no, that's stress and caffeine. And he's like, you either need to eliminate your stress or eliminate your caffeine. And I was like, well, I'm never going to be able to get rid of my stress for the foreseeable future. So I had to actually stop drinking coffee for a while. And I'm a big coffee drinker. So that was terrible for me. But anyway, I'm back to being able to drink coffee.
Yeah. My sister has kind of stopped drinking coffee too, because it just she didn't react well to it, didn't make her feel that good. So I'm kind of like, I'm sure if I drank enough of it, I would get used to it, but I'm kind of like, Well, I'm good.
Well, and it matters the roast. The lighter the roast, the more the caffeine. For instance, like I found that I can only do the lightest roast I can do is medium roast. Anything under medium roast, and I get jitters, even being someone who drinks coffee every day.
Mm,
But if I do like a medium roast or a dark roast, I can drink as much as I want and not have problems. But yeah,
mm.
if you go to like a breakfast blend, oh my gosh. Yeah, I won't sleep for days. It's terrible
Mhm.
stuff.
Mm.
Um, so now you had mentioned that you had an interesting experience in one of your border crossings. I think it was Argentina and Paraguay,
Yeah.
and you had some issues with visas or something, right? Or
Yeah. It was kind of like, yeah, I think I was, so when I got to the Paraguay border, I was in Argentina crossing over into Paraguay. I kind of just assumed that I could get the visa. I knew I needed a visa, but I assumed I could get the visa at the border because that's what I had done in Bolivia. And yeah, so I drove up to the border and they were like, no, you have to drive like all the way back to the city that I had come from, which was like a couple 100 miles away. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, but I don't even remember. Like, it just seemed like they kept sending me back and forth, like to different offices, like all around this city. And um, I think it was a holiday, so like that's why there were so few people that could help me. And so they kind of just like sent me around to these different places, and no one seemed to know anything about visas. Um, so it was kind of like, so eventually it just got too late that I had to stay overnight, like on the in that town on the border. And I woke up like really early, and when I went back to the border, I was like going back and forth so much that the people there were just like kind of like waved me through like on a like a first name basis because they had seen me so much. And I was just like, hey, where do I need to go? And eventually someone was like, oh, you need to go to this, there's like an actual like embassy or something in this town. So I ended up going to this place, which actually was the place where I needed to go. And there was like, an embassy worker or something there who was actually really nice and friendly and was interested in motorcycles. So he was showing me pictures of his motorcycles and was telling me about like, the barbecue they had had and all this stuff. So yeah, eventually I got the visa, but it was just like kind of a lot of back and forth. And yeah, when I'm thinking back, I don't even remember why I was going back and forth so much, but it was just like a bunch of different things, with things being closed because of the holidays and just miscommunications.
yeah, so I mean, reading your blog, it seemed like you had a lot of really great experiences, but it wasn't all roses. Like the time that your road washed out, right? And you had to wait for hours to get across. Like, want to tell the story of what happened there? How did you eventually get across? And yeah,
I would say in general, my whole trip was great. And when people ask me about it, they're like, "Did you ever feel unsafe?" And I was like, the answer is no. Like, I never felt unsafe because of people. But the weather did kind of throw me for a loop sometimes. And when I was going through Peru, it was the rainy season, and then they had like the most flooding in like 20 years that year. So at one point, I was riding through the mountains on my way to a city called Ayacucho, and I had been riding all day and had almost gotten to the city. I was like 20 minutes away or something. So I was like, had almost no gas, pretty much eaten all the food I had with me. because I was like, I'm going to get to the city soon and they'll be, I'll have everything I need there. But I got, I was just riding, and then I saw this, like, there was like a river going over this road that I needed to pass. And there were like cars lined up on both sides. I saw a couple of cars unsuccessfully try and cross this river, and they had to have like 10 guys like push it out again. And it seemed like the only vehicles that were able to get across were like huge trucks. So I spent a while trying to get one of these truck drivers to like load me and my bike on the back and take me across. But no one wanted to do that. So eventually it was getting kind of late, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I mean, I had my tent and sleeping bag. So I saw that there were a couple of ladies standing by the river, and it looked like they had like a house there. So I walked up to them, and I asked if they would be okay if I just kind of camped out in their yard. And I think only one of the ladies spoke Spanish. I think the other lady only spoke Quechua, actually, because it was kind of a rural area. But the lady who spoke Spanish, the younger lady, was like, well, like, if you're trying to get across the river tonight, my son has a tractor, and he is going to be home from work soon. He could probably take you and your bike across on his tractor. And I was like, I don't know how you could put a motorcycle on a tractor, but sure. So eventually her son got home, and we found that it couldn't really put the bike on the tractor safely. But by that time, other people from the town had gathered around, and there was this one kid. He looked like a teenager or something, and he was like, well, I ride my motorcycle across this river every day for work. So if you take your stuff off the bike and you go on the tractor, I could probably ride your bike up the river a little and cross over where I usually cross to get to work. And by that point, it was pitch black. I was like kind of out of it because I hadn't eaten for a while. So I was like, sure, let's give it a try. I'll give this stranger my motorcycle to ride across a flooded river in the middle of the night. Sure. So we took all my stuff off, and that's what we did. I got on the tractor with my stuff and went across, and then I could see as we were crossing the light from my bike going across the river, a little up the river, and he made it across, and then we just met on the other side, and I rode the rest of the way to Ayacucho.
That's pretty cool. I mean, to think that everyone was having so much trouble getting across that river, and this kid's just like, oh, well, I can just drive it across for you, if you need me to.
Yeah.
Were you maybe a little bit frustrated that it ended up being so easy in the end, or were you just
yeah? Well, yeah. I mean, well, the thing is, I kind of had to like make a big deal out of it, like it was really like the people that gathered around that made it so easy. Like it wouldn't have been easy on my own. That's the thing. But since all these people were so willing to help me, that's what made it easy.
Yeah. I was thinking of myself, and if I was having such trouble with a problem, because it's happened before where I've had a problem that was just frustrating me to no end, and then someone comes by and they're like, oh, I can just take care of that. And they do. And then you're just like, they made it look so easy.
Yeah.
Anyway. So the other thing, I mean, it's nature again kind of taking a swipe at you. You ended up getting dengue fever while you were out were you in Peru or Argentina when you got dengue fever? Or?
Brazil.
Oh, Brazil,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually staying, I actually wasn't riding during that time. I spent like a month in Brazil, staying with a host family and volunteering at a school there. And at one point, I drove with some of the staff from the school to an alternative education conference in Rio. And that's where I got dengue fever, was in like the hostel there. So yeah, when I was like, so we drove home, and I was kind of feeling a little out of it on the ride home. And then that night, overnight, I woke up like in like a sweat and just like hallucinating and stuff. And then in the morning I had these dots on me and like a rash, and my host family was like, yeah, that looks like dengue fever. And so we went to I went to a hospital, and it really wasn't that bad. Like I felt okay actually, but we went to this hospital and I got the dengue fever test done, and got some medications. And the one thing they wanted to do that I was not willing to do was, I guess like they had this like room that was full of people just like sitting and with like these IVs, and they wanted to give me some like, I think it was like pain medication through this IV. And I'm like deathly afraid of needles and anything like kind of medical related. So I walked into this room and just like started crying and like ran out and was like, I cannot do that. It's okay. I'll live through the pain. It's fine. I don't feel any pain. So yeah, didn't end up doing that, but we went home with some medications, and I think I was feeling fine the next day. And I just needed to like quarantine for like, I think it was like 5 days or something, just stay in the house. And yeah, it's pretty, I think there's like 2 different kinds of dengue fever. One is like deadly and one is not bad at all. And I was lucky that I got the one that was really mild. So.
Okay. And so I guess a couple things. One question, and that is dengue fever a parasite like what's that other mosquito-borne illness? Drawing a blank now, but anyway, or is it like a bacteria or a virus?
I don't know actually. Yeah, I just know that like some mosquitoes have it, and if they bite you, you get it.
Okay. And then you ended up creating quite a spectacle for your neighborhood, right?
Yeah, because I guess when someone gets dengue fever there, they have this like exterminator, fumigator guys who come in these big white outfits with these like kind of like, I don't know, like machines. And so when someone gets it, the whole street has to evacuate while these guys go into every house on the block and fumigate, or yeah, I think that's the word. With and so at one point, everyone was out in the street, and I was kind of trying to like be on the down low and not like let people know that I was the reason why they all had to leave their houses in the middle of the day. But then I remember my host brother was like, gosh, wow, all of this just because, he kind of like yelled like, all of this just because Helen got dengue fever? And I was like, do you want to say that a little louder? Like, I don't think people in Argentina heard you. but yeah, it was kind of funny. He kind of outed me, but it was okay. They were really cute.
Yeah. So you see, it seems like you became sort of a local celebrity, and you're somewhat identifiable by your Peruvian license plate. Because I know when we were talking before, it seemed like a lot of people, as soon as they saw your Peruvian license plate, they wanted to chat with you because they realized how far you were riding. And then at one point, there was actually a person who just said, "Hey, is this the girl from Chicago?" And part of it was the plate, right?
It was like I was in the middle of nowhere in Brazil, like on my way back to Peru. Um, and I stopped at a gas station, and there was like one guy there who was clearly also riding a motorcycle. So um, we kind of chatted out by the bikes, and he was like, "Oh, you're coming from Peru?" And I was like, "Yeah, blah blah." And as we were talking, this other guy pulls up, and he's kind of like a big guy, kind of like rough looking, and he had all these like patches all over that said like um, Alaska to Ushuaia, and like it was clear that he had been all over the place on his bike. And he just like pulled up next to us and was like, "Oh, hey, you're the girl from Chicago." And I was like, we were like in the middle of nowhere. And so I started like looking at my clothes to see if I had anything that said like Chicago on it, and I didn't. And I was like, "How did you know I was from Chicago?" And he was like, "Well, everyone on the road is talking about you. Like they're saying there's this girl from Chicago who's riding around on a Peruvian bike all over South America." And that was just really surprising to me, because I'm not the kind of person who like will like when I stop that I'll just kind of start randomly talking to people and stuff. Like every once in a while someone would ask me something and I would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm riding around South America. Okay, bye." But I guess, word travels fast in that particular part of Brazil. And so he said that like the truck drivers were kind of like knew about me and had seen me on the road, and people were talking about me. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool. And especially it's fun to meet people I think with similar interests, as well. And so having those motorcycles as sort of a talking point, I think is a nice icebreaker too. So,
Yeah, definitely.
what would you say was your biggest lesson that you took from your trip?
A big one is that like people aren't as bad as people think. Like when I went on this trip, everyone was just like, "You're gonna die, like South America is so dangerous, and you shouldn't be traveling alone," all this stuff. And I mean, I kind of believed that for a long time, but by the end of this trip, it's just like I just realized that 99.9% of people are good and want to help you, um and will go out of their way even to help someone that they think is in need. So that was kind of like a big thing for me, just to not, I mean, obviously to have common sense and that, but that most people really aren't out to get me. um and yeah, and I just think I just gained a lot of confidence on that trip, and that's something that I've have used a lot since then, and just having confidence in myself, and knowing that I can, that when things come up, because they will come up, that I can find some way to deal with them. It's not always going to be like the way that I was hoping it would work out, but that somehow, some way, I'll be able to figure it out.
Okay. And what kind of advice would you give someone who wanted to do something similar?
To just do it. Yeah, I think there's never going to be a time when it's like when you're going to feel ready. Like I definitely didn't feel ready to do it. And actually, when I started out, I never expected that I would make it as far as I did. I really just thought like this is going to be like a weekend trip, and then something's going to go wrong, or I'll just end up staying somewhere. So if you kind of like just not, I don't know, not take away your expectations, but like just take it one day at a time, like one step at a time. Like there were a lot of days when I woke up and was like, did not want to get on the bike, but it's just like, I'm just gonna, I'm just riding to the next town over. I'm not riding 10,000 miles this month. I'm just riding to the next town over. So kind of like thinking about it like that really helped me to get through those more difficult times.
So, aside from the trip that you're planning with your father to Alaska, are there any other trips that you are either pondering or are in the planning stages?
Yeah, a lot of things. But first of all, I want to clarify, I'm not sure if my dad's gonna go to Alaska with me. Um, yeah, he kind of learned on this some trip over the summer that yeah, it riding long distances takes a toll on your body, and especially if you don't have like unlimited amount of time, then you really like, it's you need to, it's hard to be able to just like stop if you're not feeling great. So he was kind of like glad that we had this kind of trial run this summer so that he could see what it was like. And I think if we were to go to Alaska together, I think maybe he could like ship his bike to like Seattle or something, and then we could ride through the Yukon and Alaska together, something like that. But I don't know if we would do that the whole trip that we were originally planning to do, just because it's a lot.
Yeah.
But other than Alaska, I still want to go to Alaska for sure. Other than that, I'd really love to go ride through as much of Mexico as possible. I lived in Mexico for 6 months in college, and just really loved I went to a couple of different states, and every place I went to was really beautiful. I'd love to explore more. Like a dream trip would be Cuba. If I could somehow get a motorcycle there and ride around Cuba, that's like would be amazing. Southeast Asia is a big one on my list. Yeah, I think those are the main ones. Southeast
No
Asia.
Australia.
Um, I've heard really good things about New Zealand. That would be cool, but I don't know. I guess I feel like since it's like an English speaking place, it just seems like it wouldn't be that exciting, or I don't know.
I think Australia is fun to ask people about because I get a lot of mixed answers when it comes to Australia, because a lot of people think about the spiders, or they'll think about like how many venomous snakes and things that they have, or the alligators. And then other people are just like, no way, Australia is amazing. Like they've got such great wildlife. Of course, I want to go to Australia. And, they talk about things like the kangaroos and the koalas. Like, you know what I mean? And how beautiful the landscape is. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious if it had entered into your thoughts at all. So.
I guess I think of Australia as like I think the coast would be cool, but then like isn't the middle just like hot desert kind of?
I
Like
think they've got
that
a
doesn't
number of
sound so
environments.
appealing to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Yeah, but New Zealand, I mean, obviously New Zealand is going to be beautiful. It's where isn't that where they filmed The Hobbit or something like that?
Yeah, I think
Or
so.
no, it was Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, something Lord of the Rings is there.
Yeah, I've actually got a friend or ex-coworker, however you want to think of it, who lives in New Zealand right now.
Cool.
She loves it, so
Yeah, I think if you know someone in the place where you're going to, that makes it way better to kind of have someone who knows their way around. Because I tend to enjoy going places, exploring places that aren't as touristy. So that makes it a lot easier if you know someone who lives there.
So you mentioned Southeast Asia, and that kind of brings me to a couple of questions. One, do you speak any of the languages from Southeast Asia?
No, not at all.
Okay, so that might answer my next question, which is, do you think someone who didn't speak any Spanish or Portuguese could have done the trip that you did?
Yeah, I definitely think they could. I mean, obviously, knowing the language, I think makes it like a more rich experience because you can talk to the locals and connect with them in that way. But I think I totally could have gotten by. I mean, there were like there were places in South America where a lot of people didn't even speak Spanish. It was Quechua or Aymaru or, some of the other indigenous languages. And, we would just like point and, it was just like, it was still an amazing experience. I mean, those were the coolest places to be because it's just so interesting and different, and people, you don't really need like verbal communication to get by with people. It's pretty easy to just point and use other forms of communication.
Okay. So to kind of start wrapping things up a bit, and bring people up to speed on some of your motorcycles, what do you have now, and what did you start out on?
So right before my South America trip, I got a Honda Rebel 250, and rode it for, a couple of months before I moved to South America. And then when I got back from the South America, I sold my Rebel and bought a 2018 Honda CRF 250L Rally, which is like the CRF 250L, but a little more outfitted for longer rides. Like it has a slightly larger gas tank and full fairing and stuff like that.
Okay. And all those were Hondas, right? And I think that you said that you worked at least one summer at a Honda dealership, right?
Yeah. A couple summers ago, I worked at a Honda at the place where I bought my my Rally.
Okay. And how did it go as far as sales are concerned? I mean, did you do a good job? I mean, as an introvert, was that a challenge to sell motorcycles?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I did a lot better than I was expecting. I actually sold pretty well. But yeah, it definitely challenged me in ways that I've never been challenged before. And I learned a lot and cried a lot and was ultimately glad that I did it.
So what strategies did you develop to overcome your introvert nature to be able to sell bikes?
Well, I learned pretty quickly that confidence has a lot to do with success in sales. So within like the first couple of days, I realized that, and actually I think a couple of people pointed it out to me, that when I walked, I looked very like kind of like uptight. I was really scared, and I think it showed. And so a couple of days in, I was kind of just shadowing my coworkers, the other salespeople, and I noticed that. Well, I mean, I was the only girl on the sales floor, and I noticed that all these guys like just seemed so confident, and they seemed like they could say like whatever they wanted, and also the way that they walked was significantly different from the way that I kind of like carried myself. This one guy in particular, like literally walked like chest out, like just like he owned the place. And so I was like, I need to be more like that. So I spent like a couple weeks just walking directly behind him and trying to do everything that he was doing and walking the same way that he was walking, kind of saying some of the things that he was saying. And I felt really silly. I probably looked kind of silly at first, but over time, I think it kind of like, it really helped me to kind of like almost over exaggerate this confidence and this walk. I was able to kind of tone it down over time, and make it a little more my own. But I think that made a big difference in the end.
And were you able to utilize your stories from your trip to sort of get people interested in buying bikes, or was that not much of a factor?
Yeah, I did bring it up sometimes, but my managers were actually like you should talk about that more. Like you should bring that up more because that's a really cool thing and like a really good connecting point with customers. And I remember like one of my managers in particular I would be like talking to a customer and he'd just come up and be like, "Hey, did you know that Helen's the most badass rider in this whole building? She went to South America. She's done all this stuff." And I would be like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, no, it was a little bit awkward, but like, I also appreciated that he was, really supportive of me and, wanted me to share about my experiences.
Well, I mean, he's definitely right on the badass front, and I mean, one of the things I'm noticing a lot about what you say about your experiences, shows a lot of bravery, because they talk about bravery being like not being scared or not being nervous or whatever, but just recognizing that you are and doing it anyway. And ever since you were 15 and you had such um, had such a scary experience to some extent, and then yet you still came back and did it. It's like you're an introvert and you still threw yourself into sales, which is one of the most extroverted professions I can think of. You know what I mean? And you just keep doing it, and I think that's admirable. So he's definitely right on that front, in my opinion.
Thanks.
Yeah. Now, one thing I would love to know as well is, with all these trips planned and you want to do them on motorcycles, you got super lucky going through South America where you really didn't have many mechanical issues. Have you thought about learning about the mechanical side of a bike, just so that if you're stuck somewhere, you can kind of do some emergency repairs? And
Yeah, I definitely do want to learn more about that. I've found it, I don't know. I think I could definitely be doing more to learn about it, but it has been really challenging for me. Uh, Kind of like, I feel like I want to find a mentor to like help me and teach me some of that stuff. I've kind of tried like reading about it, like online and, even watching YouTube videos. And I just find it very boring. It's just not something I get like excited about naturally, but I do really want to learn about it. So I'm kind of like looking for a mentor, preferably a female, to like help me kind of just go through some of at least the basic things. And because I really do want to learn more.
have you heard of the Litas?
Yeah.
Do they have a chapter out in Chicago?
I don't I don't think they have one in Chicago. They might have one in like Milwaukee, but there's a group in Chicago that's kind of similar to that, called the Bleeders. So yeah, and they're a really cool group. And I haven't. I feel like I still need to do some more networking and stuff with people in the Chicago area because, I know there are people out there.
Yeah, because I've listened to some interviews of folks from the Litas, and it sounds like a lot of them kind of teach each other skills, whether it's writing skills or maintenance skills or repair skills. Like it seems like a great environment where people are sharing a lot of knowledge. So if you're looking for a mentor, that was the first thing that came to mind was, oh, maybe there's a Litas group out there that she could join up with. And I don't know, maybe the group you're talking about is similar, but I know
Yeah,
that.
and actually, I was
Yeah,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
say, and I just found out about another group that just started in Chicago. It was like a ladies writing group or something, and I've seen that they've done a couple of like oil changes and stuff, like group oil changes, and yeah, so that's another group I want to connect with. I just don't feel comfortable doing it right now because of the current
Yeah,
situation, but once things calm down a little bit, I want to dive into that a little more.
because I know that Shruti, she'd mentioned that she learned maintenance through the writing group that she was in out in India.
Oh, cool.
So it definitely, I think you're on the right track. Obviously, it sounds like a mentor is the way to go when it comes to bike maintenance because I'm the same way. Like I've tried to learn things either online reading or through YouTube for mechanical type stuff, and I don't know. I don't feel the confidence that I do with learning other things online.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but
Hard.
yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that's really everything I'd hoped to cover. Anything that you want people to know about that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so. We
Yeah.
covered a lot.
All right. Now, if people want to continue following along with your adventures, what would be the best route for them, do you think?
I think I'm mostly active on Instagram, Helen's Moto Diaries.
Mhm.
I also have a Facebook page and a blog that I haven't updated really recently, but Instagram and Facebook are probably the best.
Okay, great. Well, I know that I'll be looking out for your next trip. Um, Hopefully, it's sooner rather than later. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they're going to get a handle on this whole situation before another year goes by. Because, like many of us in the world, I'm sure I'm ready for this to be over.
Yeah, definitely. I'm ready to. Yeah, I miss traveling, but we can always do the short trips, and motorcycling is a generally pretty safe thing in terms of COVID safety.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's definitely been it's definitely been really good for me picking up motorcycles during COVID because it does give me something to do outside, um,
Yeah.
and be socially distant. So,
Hmm.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. And let's see, what do we get here? Hour and a half? That's not too terrible, huh?